What's going on, folks? Ted from Immersion here, and I wanted to talk to you a little about a recent article that Wizards of the Coast released with some stuff that you can look at in this book, as well as what I think, or at least what comicbook.com thinks might lead to what the next piece of content we're going to get from Wizards of the Coast, and they're thinking Feywild, which, hey, if that turns out to be true, I was right. Which is not a vindication for me or me trying to pat myself on the back. It's just a thing that I took out from clues that anyone could have found, and it seems to be backed by some of the stuff we've seen recently. So before I go into this and that article that Wizards of the Coast released, I wanted to talk to you about the sponsor for today's video, Skillshare. Now, you're familiar with Skillshare at this point. It's an online learning community with thousands of different courses that you can take and get classes on, everything from editing to cooking to art to Photoshop. Whatever you need or whatever you want to learn, there's typically a class there that you can get access to. And I wanted to show you the class that I just finally finished, Video Editing with Adobe Premiere Pro for Beginners by Jordy Vanderput. I am completely self-taught in Adobe Premiere Pro. That's what I use to edit all my videos. And this really helped me to lock down the fundamentals and confirm. And actually, some of it was a pat on the back to me because like, hey, I knew everything that I needed to know how to do basic editing, but there was a little bit more about mixing and how to do color correction that I was completely unfamiliar with that I learned from this class. So there will be a link in the description if you want to go and try out Skillshare for yourself. This is a link to get free. The first 1,000 people who sign up with that link will get access to a free trial of Skillshare Premium, but a Skillshare membership is only $10 a month for those who don't miss out on that or just want to sign up and continue to go forward with Skillshare. So thank you, Skillshare, for sponsoring this video. Why not take this time as the pandemic wraps up to enter out into the world again once things are clear and normal with a new skill, and Skillshare is there to help you do that. So let's jump over to the article here on the Wizards of the Coast website. This is part of their new blog series they've been doing, where they sort of give us some insight into what's going on in the background in the world of D&D. And it's called How to Make D&D Scary, and I won't really belabor this article, but it is an interesting read. They talk about a couple of things that I thought were interesting, right? How D&D is D&D. Don't try to make it something that it's not, right? It's not a horror game, it's D&D. And they talk a little bit about that. They talk about how horror adventures are different and how there's different types of horror, how to use fear mechanics, the different kinds of fear, the different kinds of horror, all things that are kind of highlighted in Van Richten's guide, a little bit about distinguishing between the characters and the players. But then there's this section here at the end, 8 things to know the dark power, or 8 things the dark powers don't want you to know. Now, I read through these, and I tried to do my best to see if they were referencing anything. And they're more or less like fun trivia bits in my mind, right? Like the one that says, if your copy has instructions on page 257, ignore them. 256 is the appendices with the spirit board. So 257 is the blank black page on the other side. Little fun joke there. And I read through some of the other ones, and there are a lot of cool conspiracy theory stuff or things you could use to tie this to Curse of Strahd or other things. But the one that comicbook.com calls out here is this one, Isolde. Leader of the Carnival, has ties to more than one group of otherworldly entertainers. What could have happened to her former crew? And if we jump over here to this comicbook.com article, they talk about that article and Van Richten's guide and mention that in the history of Isolde as described in the chapter in her domain of dread, the Carnival, they talk about in the past, she ran afoul of an archfey named, I think it's Zybilna, and basically she was corrupted, her companions were killed, and she was basically trapped there. And then she ran across a carnival tied to the Shadowfell, made some trades with some Shatterkai, and basically was allowed to leave the Feywild, but Zybilna kind of cursed her or removed her memories and then sent malevolent creatures after her, which is why the kind of things that are still haunting the Domain of Dread now. But then they say right here, Zybilna and the Second Carnival are both new inclusions to Isolde's lore and seems out of place initially. However, the blog post says what could have become to her former crew, which seems to suggest that there are plans to include Zybilna and her Feywild domain in some kind of upcoming product, right? It probably isn't just a throwaway line, is what they're getting at. When coupled with the publication of an Unearthed Arcana playtest earlier this year, that will be the folk of the Feywild playtest, that included new options for Feywild races, it seems like Wizards of the Coast is developing some sort of product tied to the Feywild. Whether this is an adventure or sourcebook remains to be seen. Of course, it's also possible that Zybillum will appear in a non-Feywild campaign setting, as carnivals are known for their mobility. So that kind of pretty much ties into all the stuff that I've been saying, right? We saw the folks of the Feywild. I had said I thought this was going to be based on the fact that some of the updates we saw to the Neverwinter MMO, which if you don't know, Neverwinter, the MMO, typically mimics the release schedule, right? So if Icewind Dale's coming out, they're going to put Icewind Dale content in Neverwinter, and that was sort of what we saw as things were going on, right? As Tomb of Annihilation was releasing, they released Chult. And it's an MMO, so they can drop live, relatively live updates into the game so you can keep playing it, and they were tying all of the themes to the game to the various, to the content releases in the physical books that we'd get or the campaigns we'd get for D&D so that you could have both, right? And I mean, in theory, if you wanted, you could play the game and maybe get ideas to use in your adventures as well. So we saw that I think definitely from Tomb of Annihilation on, that was definitely a thing. It might have happened before that, but they were basically releasing, Rage of Demons is coming out, Out of the Abyss. That's a section in Neverwinter, and they've been doing that. And then out of the blue, kind of randomly, it always had been following that. And then we saw this Feywild update earlier in the year. Now, I guess one of the original ones before they started doing this, kind of marrying it up to 5e's release, they had done a Feywild campaign. But in my mind, what seemed out of the blue, they decided to go back and re-update and come up with all new content based around the Feywild. And I said, well, that seems weird because everything's been tied to releases. So when's the Feywild thing coming out? And I kind of thought that might have been what we were going to get. It was either going to be Dragonlance or the Feywild stuff coming out, but it turned out to be Van Richten's. Then they release a Feywild Unearthed Arcana, which, remember, they released the Gothic lineages for Unearthed Arcana, and then like a month later they announced that they were coming in Van Richten's guide. So we know there's probably going to be like an August release or so of the next D&D product. It will likely be announced at D&D Live, which is a joint venture this year between G4, the previous video game television channel, and now is coming back. G4 and D&D are partnering together to do D&D Live 2021. And that, I think, is either mid-June or July, and they're probably going to announce at that what the next campaign or the next product will be, which will probably be, I'm guessing, in August, which will be a Feywild. Now, I was thinking an adventure, but the fact that these races are there, we've never got, well, I guess I was going to say we've never gotten new races in an adventure. That's not technically true. We got the Genasi as a new race in Princes of the Apocalypse. We got Genasi as a new race, as well as new magic items and a whole bunch of new spells included in Princes of the Apocalypse, which is the only time that's ever happened, although we did get the Elemental Evil Player's Companion sort of in conjunction with that, which was a free PDF. So we've gotten, in the past, we've gotten with any of the kind of crossover campaign guides, it usually comes with new races, 2 subclasses, an adventure, and like setting material, right? That's what we've seen with that's what we've seen with Ravnica, that's what we saw with Theros, what we just saw with Ravenloft, and even to a lesser extent, rules were kind of different with Explorer's Guide to Wildemount. We got a couple more subclasses there, but again, with all the magic crossovers and Van Richten's, we got new races and 2 subclasses. So I don't think we're going to get subclasses because we haven't seen anything Unearthed Arcana-wise other than the dragon ones, which I still think are being saved for Dragonlance. So I'm going to say that this might be a Feywild adventure, with new races in it. I don't know. I'll put a link in the description to the D&D article as well as to the comicbook.com article if you want to check them out for yourself. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. Thank you to my patrons over on Patreon for continuing to support me and the channel, and we'll see you all next time.